Hi and welcome to Unit 2 of AS Law. Today we're going to be starting on this booklet, which is for Section A. The pages that we're going to be looking at are the first two. The first page has an introduction to criminal liability at the top, and we're also going to be looking over the page where it says omissions. So, the first thing that you need to know about criminal liability is that it is made up of two elements. First of all, you have Actus Reus, which means guilty conduct or guilty act. The other part is mens rea, which is a guilty mind. In order to commit an offence, you need both Actus Reus, a guilty act, and mens rea, a guilty mind. What we're going to be focusing on today is Actus Reus, the guilty act, the guilty conduct. When we say a guilty act, we have to remember that it has to be a voluntary act. The case of Hill and Baxter, Lord Goddard stated, suppose a driver had a stroke or an epileptic fit. He could not be said to be driving. A blow from a stone or attack by a swarm of bees would also be similar. So, the driver would no longer be voluntarily driving, and so no offence would be committed if he was to come off the road and to injure somebody. So, if I go up to Tom and I grab his hand and put a knife in it and I stab Claire, who has committed a criminal offence? Has Tom committed an offence? No, because I was manipulating him. His act was not voluntary, so he would not be guilty of an offence. I would be. Another part of Actus Reus that we have to think about is what is known as state of affairs crimes. A lot of people think that state of affairs crimes are very unfair. Some elements of criminal law are unfair, but we just have to bear that in mind and continue on with the studies because there's nothing really we can do. So, to illustrate state of affairs crimes, we need to look at the case of R. and Larsena from 1933. Larsena was a French woman who'd been in England. When she was no longer allowed to stay in England, she went to Ireland. When she landed in Ireland, she was immediately sent back to England and handed over to the English police. She was charged with being an alien without permission to be in England, and she was found guilty of this, even though she had been sent back to England against her will by the Irish police. In Larsena, she was guilty of a criminal offence because of the state of affairs, so the situation in which she found herself. She was guilty because of her situation, her circumstances, and not because of an act that she committed. This is why I say a lot of people think this is unfair. Another element of Actus Reus is omissions, which means a failure to do something. Under certain circumstances, a failure to do something may constitute a criminal act, although generally not doing something is usually not an offence. So, for example, if you're walking along the street and you see somebody has been knocked over by a car, they're obviously injured. Nobody's there helping them. Do you have to do anything to help them? The answer is no. You're under no obligation to help somebody who is injured. Generally, not doing something is not a criminal offence, although there are some circumstances where a failure to act may be a criminal offence. One example of this is where you have a duty arising from a contract. This can be seen in the case of R. and Pitwood from 1902. Pitwood was employed to open and close a railway gate. One day he forgot to close the gate, and this was his omission. A cart got onto the track whilst there was a train coming and somebody was killed. Pitwood was convicted of manslaughter. Because he was employed, this was his contract of employment. And he was under this contract to do his duty, which was to open and close the gate. He failed to do his duty and it resulted in somebody's death. So his omission amounted to a criminal offence. Another example of where a failure to act can be a criminal offence is a duty arising from an assumption of responsibility. This can be seen in the case of R and Stone and Dobinson from 1977. Stone lived with his girlfriend Dobinson. They were both quite elderly and they were generally struggling. Stone's sister came to live with them. She was anorexic and she stayed in her room all the time. Stone and Dobinson did very little to help her, and eventually she died of gross neglect. They didn't call the doctor even though they knew she was very ill. They were both convicted of her manslaughter. Stone and Dobinson had taken on the duty to look after her when they said that she could come and stay with them, and by failing to help her or look after her, they were responsible for her death. Another example of where an omission can amount to a guilty act is where there is a duty arising from starting the chain of events, or where there is a duty arising from creating a dangerous situation. This can be seen in the case of R and Miller from 1983. Miller was a squatter and he fell asleep smoking a cigarette which started to burn the mattress that he was sleeping on. When he woke up, he noticed that it was on fire, but he did nothing to stop it. He just went into another room. The fire spread and caused severe damage. Miller was found guilty of arson, not because he started the initial fire, but because he failed to do anything to stop it when he saw it. So, that is the information that you need for Actus Reus. You need to be able to give a definition of Actus Reus as a guilty act. You need to be able to describe voluntary acts, as stated in the case of Hill and Baxter. And you need to be able to describe state of affairs crimes, as seen in the case of R and Larsener. You also need to be able to describe an omission, a failure to act, and say where omissions will amount to a criminal offence. A duty arising from a contract, as seen in R and Pickwood. Duty arising from the assumption of responsibility, in the case of R and Stone and Dobinson, and the duty arising from starting a chain of events or creating a dangerous situation, as seen in Miller. That's everything that you need to know at the moment about Actus Reus. If you need any more information, you can look on the Sixth Form Law website, or you can ask your class teacher.